Welcome to the Rant Live.
We managed to pull that off.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow.
Man.
Hi.
Yeah, that was I don't know, this is like doing a rewatch of an old television show you used to see back in the day, you know what I mean? And then hearing the entry music is that's pretty cool.
Man, it's been a while, dude. I looked back. December 20th was the last show we did before the holidays, before I got a job. Really, we haven't done the Rant this show because I had to get a job and it's consumed my life. And so, but now here we are. And Evan's had a job, but he had time built around this, whereas for me it was like all new. I hadn't had like a legit real job, air quotes, for 8 years, so it took me a little while to get back into it, but I'm back.
Dude, see, here's it. We've been away for so long. I've gotten 7 tattoos since our last show. that's how long we've been, which is more about probably my addiction because it's only been 7.5 months. So that says more about me than it does probably our layoff. But that's what I have done when given all this extra time without recording a show. I got nothing better to do than go sit in a tattoo chair. So
let's see the latest.
Let's see if I can. I gotta move my mic. So
okay. There it is. You got the whole sleeve going. Nice. Yeah. As my kids like to say, toit.
Yeah, that's so basically the lower half of my arm's done.
Wow.
And a good chunk of the upper part because I got the inside bicep done there. So
much has changed.
I need to now I need to figure out how to make more money because these things aren't free, which is shockingly. But anyway,
well, it's definitely not going to be done through this show, as we know.
No. This with all 3 viewers we've got, unless we've got some kind of an angel investor out there, someone who doesn't. Hey, if you love the show and you don't want it to go away for another 6 or 7 months, just fill our pockets. That would be really nice.
That's a good idea.
That'd be awesome.
I don't even think I set it up correctly on all the different venues. It's like there's a whole process behind like doing a podcast, and part of it is getting it like set up and the background and all the things everyone sees. If you're watching it, if you're listening, then it just sounds like it's always sounded. But so hopefully we get more of the listeners. We'll see how that works out. But
we'll we got to do something crazy. We got to be like the old school FM disc jockeys and just come up with some crazy stunts.
I like that.
Well,
I mean, I was in Chicago with my family for 10 games, and I must say that I think I brought the Cubs some good luck because they have been really good. I should have counted it up, but I went right after the first series after the All-Star break when they played the Boston Red Sox.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been pretty good since then. Let's see, they went into that 40. They were 42 and 47, and they are now 56 and 54. So if we do the math on that, that's
7 games over in that time is not bad.
Yeah, that's 14 and 7 since we went. And technically we didn't go to that Friday Red Sox game. So really, I'm going to say 14 and 6. 14 and 6. You're welcome, Cubs world.
Yeah, now, and it's funny how quickly, and it is kind of interesting, right? Because having not done the show throughout the season, I mean, we haven't been able to cover spring training, the regular season, or anything, and it's kind of funny how up and down the team is, but how right there at the trade deadline, right when they bought instead of selling, fairly soft buy, right? But still, it was not selling, and how quickly the mood and everything changed, right? Even though they're still like, it is wild to me how many people wanted them to sell, right? And then B, were even moderately upset that they didn't sell anyway, right? And it's just
like an addiction almost.
Yeah, I
They
think
need that junk.
yeah, and that's I think there's that, and then there's this sense that like that, and that's how the team got good right through 2012 to 14, really when Theo Epstein took over and started running some things, and that's what it was. But I think people are just completely mistaking the idea that the team as constructed now, with all the money they spent in the offseason, whether it was wise or not, and some of it certainly we've already seen them part ways with Eric Hosmer and Trey Mancini, and
Thank
you know,
God.
look at that, yeah, and those were obviously neither of them worked out the way that I think Mancini is particularly disappointing. Hosmer was kind of like that was sort of expected, but you know, I don't understand how people keep looking at this like sell, sell, sell. Like, who are you going to sell? How is that going to make this team better moving forward? Well, they can't win the World Series this year. Well, neither can 29 other teams, right? One team is going to win the World Series. 29 teams are not. But if you're going to sit there and punt when you're in a crappy division, when you've got this talent, and when you want to go acquire more talent next year, how many guys want to come play for you if you just keep sitting there and trading off everyone that you've got that's of any value? You know, that eventually begins to harm you. But at the same time, it's just wild to me that people would want to be like, yeah, I'd rather the Cubs just traded people off and suck. Now I've joked about it, right? It makes it less stressful, right? Because it's like, hey, if they're not in it, if they're not trying, it's like, I can just turn the game off or not even pay attention.
Yeah, but then it's like it's also far less entertaining. And
right.
Let's face it, that's what this is all about.
Right. And
entertaining us.
And what's funny, you know, again, I keep going back to this too. And we've talked our fair shit about Tom Ricketts, but everybody's, oh, Ricketts will never spend. He would. No, listen, man, this guy just got his sports book opened. He just rolled out a marquee direct-to-consumer streaming service, which I subscribe to after downgrading my Xfinity service because literally Marquee was the only thing we were watching our actual television service for. So I'm like, cool. I was able to save like $75 a month or something like that on my cable bill.
Is that just for in market?
Yes, it's only for in market.
Okay.
Which is cool, you know, because again, I am in market. So it's like if I could drop off, you know, $75 or it was actually like $100 on the bill, but I was able to upgrade the our internet to a faster speed and unlimited, which before it had been like a terabyte that we would get. But when everybody's home over the summer and I work from home, so I'm constantly on the Wi-Fi, you can imagine that we would go over a terabyte pretty frequently. So anyway, I ended up saving like $100 a month. And that's with the separate Marquee subscription, which is better. The new app they rolled out, although I still can't get it on a couple of TVs. So that's another topic, but which is all a way of saying like
show on that.
Yeah, you can't roll out this new streaming service and be like, oh, by the way, we're going to suck ass for the next 2 months again. You know, like that's not a good way to go. So anyway, I think there's Tom Ricketts doesn't want to spend money that's not going to come back to him, right? Is essentially what it comes down to. And spending money on players right now is a really, really good way to put more butts in seats, get people into that sports book and get people buying Marquee. So he'll absolutely spend if it means making more. And that's really at the end of the day, what we're looking at.
Well, and I mean, the biggest acquisition the Cubs made arguably is Cody Bellinger, right? And the fact that he's been able to turn it around the way that he has, good for him. I mean, like super happy for him, obviously, because just seems like a really good dude from where I live currently, in around Chandler, Phoenix area. And man, but it's just he's a Cub, right? I mean, like he's just like he just feels like a Cub. I really hope the Cubs are able to re-sign him. And I don't know. You know, I don't think they're going to get like a hometown discount on that in any way, shape, or form. But what do you think is going to end up happening with Bellinger?
You know, I was thinking about this. Somebody actually kind of comped Jamer Candelario to who am I thinking of now? Nick Castellanos, but I almost think Bellinger is just in terms of his personality and things like that is a better because it feels like a dude who Castellanos felt the same way. Like as soon as he got traded to the Cubs, like immediately ingratiated himself to the fans and really took over and kind of carried the team a little bit. And everybody felt like, man, this is a dude who belongs here, who we'd like to see here for a long time moving forward. And that's kind of how Bellinger has felt from the start. I mean, everybody everybody loves to do. Although I still like how Patrick Wisdom says he never gets too high or too low, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure Cody Bellinger gets pretty high every now and again. But that is, I mean, this is a dude, right? It's not an either or thing. I'm not saying you either try to extend Bellinger or you try to pursue Ohtani, right? That's not. Those are two vastly different players, situations. The money's completely different. I think if you listen to what Hoyer said the other day about him, and the way he talked about Bellinger, so Cody knows how we feel about him. He had a big smile on his face because Hoyer typically is really close-lipped, doesn't really show much emotion in those things, and he had that big smile and was laughing about, well, I don't discuss contract talks during the season, and I'm not saying they've had talks on an extension or that an extension is forthcoming, but I do feel like they've kept in really close contact. And we heard this, Scott Boras talked about it pretty openly. Like, there's a reason he directed Bellinger to the Cubs. He knew it was a good fit, and I think he felt like this was something that was going to help him to build his value, which he has done tremendously. Dude has earned himself a big-ass contract, but I think both sides look at it and realize that this is and will continue to be a really, really good fit for him. Just all things all around. I think there's a good opportunity for the Cubs, provided they are bidding, right? Like you said, no hometown discount. He's not going to sit there and take, $50 million less from them or 2 years less or something like that on a deal. But I do think that if all things were considered equal, he would choose the Cubs over another comparable offer if they're in that bidding. And I think they should be, right?
Well,
There's no
and
reason
if you're
not to be.
Cody Bellinger, particularly given what happened to him in LA, like that steep drop off, and then you come to Chicago and like you got your mojo back just like that. That's got to be mentally in his head, like, man, this is where I came and got my mojo back. And we don't know what happened in LA. Was it with the fans? Was it with the press? Was it with the ownership? Was it with management? But there was something that wasn't working for him there. And so you have to take that into consideration, right? So maybe, right? I mean, I guess you could go for the payday and not really care about that type of stuff. But it seems like Bellinger is the type of dude who would care about that, And so I don't know.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? A lot of people, he's Scott Boras' client. He'll never do this. He'll never extend. Listen, at the end of the day, and this is the same thing, I want to say this the right way because then people will be like, well, Chris Bryant never re-signed. He turned down 200. No, he didn't. Again, let's make that clear. He didn't turn anything down because that offer never even got to Bryant. It never got past Boras, if it even got there. And when it did, it wasn't $200 million, right? There was a base and then there were all kinds of incentives and things like that. So anyway, let's set that aside. But it wasn't a matter of Bryant refusing to extend or Scott Boras not being willing to extend. At the end of the day, Scott Boras works for his clients and he needs to do what's best for those clients. Now, what's best is quite often the most money. But let's just throw it out there. If the Pirates were offering the most money, if name a team that's kind of a shit show. I mean, yeah, he'd probably still take the Mets, but yeah, I mean, where's he going to go, right? But we've seen we've seen what happens when they, when they sign guys. Look at that. But I do think that if he said, hey, I want to stay here, this is where I want to be, work something out, right? And then at that point, it's Boras trying to get that done and saying, here's what we want. Meet this number and he stays. And I think if that's what Bellinger wants. Now, again, it could be we want the Brandon Nimmo deal. What was that, like 163 or 164, something like that? It escapes me, but I'd give him that.
Sure,
I'd give Bellinger that right
all day long.
Yeah, I mean he's still only 28, whatever. Right now, it's a little bit long. Maybe they don't want that. Maybe they want something different. I don't know. And people can complain about that and say it's silly. But if they say, here's the number that you have to meet, cool, done. And I will say this, right? Look at what Hoyer did with Candelario. A lot of people thought that was a steep price between DJ Hers and Kevin Made to give up. We could parse that a few different ways, and realistically it kind of was. But there were like 8 or 9 or 10 teams that wanted to get Candelario, And Hoyer was able to spend, willing to spend for prospect depth, right? It wasn't very costly because the Mets bought down. And that's why he did it, right? He had to pay a little bit more in prospects because the Nats, paid down Candelario's salary to the league minimum. So the Cubs were only paying like $250,000 for him, which is fantastic for the value that he's already provided, right? Like, already worth it.
In
Done.
a couple games.
Yeah. And so if you're looking at moving forward, Hayward's money falls off the books next year. That's what?
Hallelujah.
22. There you go. Turn around, give that to Bellinger. Done. Right? Like,
exactly.
Hendricks falls off the books. There's a couple other things that fall off. So, again, depending on what that is, and I know, again, Boris is going to want to, check everybody out, pit teams against one another. But like I said, if Bellinger gives him, I want to stay in Chicago, man, make it work.
And
then
he's the missing piece.
What do they want to do? Yeah.
Right. Because you've got to have somebody to build around. And the thing is that the Cubs had a whole bunch of players to build around, and then they traded them all away. And, it's kind of yet to be determined what the impact of all those trades are, because I don't think anyone that was traded that the Cubs received has made it to the big leagues yet. If so, it's no one that's been impactful.
Wisniewski.
But it was and he has not been impactful in any way.
Jose Cuas has already made it up, but that was that was like a different deal, right?
But so I guess what I'm saying is that the Cubs need somebody to build around. It's not Ian Happ, they don't have that star power, that big bat that they can build around in any of their players. If you take Cody Bellinger off the team, Christopher Morel has been playing great, right? But he doesn't feel like he's that star guy.
No.
And so it's like, who is that guy that you're building around? It's not going to be PCA. We all want it to be PCA. Someday maybe it will be. But these guys that are in the minor leagues, they're not like sure things like Chris Bryant felt like he was, like Javier Baez became for like 2 years.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, you got to have, if you're the Chicago Cubs, you've got to have at least one guy, preferably 3 or 4, that A, you can sell their jerseys, right? And B, like, people can relate to them and be like, that's a Cub. And I just feel like Bellinger really fits in that mold more than anybody else that I can see coming up for the Cubs, unless they sign a free agent. And then who are they going to sign, right? The Cubs aren't signing Ohtani.
He would be the only other one. Like, that's clearly far and away the one dude who you can look at. And I know, it's funny because a lot of people are like, well, what do you do for the Angels? Well, listen, if the Angels are too stupid to be able to build a winner around Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout, that's on them, right? That's them being stupid. But, people are like, well, what are they doing? Think about where the Angels would be if he was not playing for them, right? The dude threw a one-hit complete game shutout in game 1 of a doubleheader and then hit 2 homers in the second game, okay? Like, you look at the things that he's doing and it's otherworldly. If there's one player you could look at, say, this dude can carry you, it would be him. But, and I was talking about this, there's several times we can look at it. Bellinger's the one guy on this team. Look, Swanson's been pretty hot. I know he's doing some great things at shortstop. Love it. But Bellinger's the one guy right now who you could look at and be like, this is like what KB did in his prime, or Rizzo, or let's go back to Sosa or Soriano, a guy who, when he is right, when he is going, you could look at a week at a time or two where it's like everybody just climb on his back and let's go. Just show up and maybe do your role every once in a while.
Yep.
They need that guy, like you said, to build around, because you don't want to have to depend on your prospects to be the man or the men, right? Or the people, right? If we're being kind of gender neutral in that regard. But you have to have someone who's there. You say, this is a guy who's going to bat 3rd or 4th or 5th, whatever, in our lineup moving forward. The other thing about Bellinger is, like, you could stick him out there in center if you're concerned at all about PCA, right? With any rookie hiccups, Bellinger could play out there. PCA could slide over one of the other corners, because I think at this point we're looking at, like, I know they've still got Happ and they've got Suzuki for a few more years, but Suzuki's looking like a platoon guy at this point. Tauchman's been starting in right a couple times.
Yeah.
Oh, and guess what? Bellinger also can play elite first base, right? You can move these guys around, but to me, that's your bird in the hand. Because who else?
And then I think you
Go ahead.
add guys like Dansby Swanson, who, I mean, he's like fringe superstar kind of guy, right? I mean, he's just a super solid player, really good offensively. And I think Nico is kind of like really close to that level too. Doesn't quite have the same power, but not that Swanson has power, but and you add Nico and Swanson there. I mean, the Cubs still need to do something with third base. I mean, at least Wisdom's been hitting home runs. And I don't know if they're going to end up putting Candelario over there. I mean, he's on a 1-year deal, right? Like he terms out after the end of this year
for now.
And so, highly unlikely the Cubs resign him, but you never know. Especially if he keeps tearing it up, but we'll see. It's only been a couple games. So yeah, I mean,
go get Matt Chapman when he's a free agent. Like that would be a great fit.
Yeah.
I mean, but here's the thing, right? We talk about that. To me, it's that you look at free agency, right? You talk about where are you going to get these stars? Ohtani is the clear number one. It's like Ohtani and then a huge gap, and then Bellinger and maybe Chapman, and then probably another really big gap, right? Because like, had he not signed an extension, Ian Happ would have been one of the 10. He hadn't done himself a ton of favors this year, but he was looking like one of the top available hitters in what would have been next year's. He would have been a free agent next year if the Cubs had just kept him on an ARB salary. So it's a pretty thin free agent class, just overall. And when you're talking about stars, like you look at Matt Chapman he's a great, excellent player, right? Just like you talk about, like Swanson and some of those. But is he a superstar? No, like Shohei Ohtani is an elite level, top billing. Like he's Brad Pitt, right? You put his name on the top billing, and people are going to go see the movie, even if they don't know anything about it. That's where Ohtani is. And Bellinger is playing himself back. He was that dude for a couple of years in LA, right? And injuries and so forth kind of took their toll. But now he's back. He's healthy. He's a dude who can carry you. If you have him there, the other thing that does is it allows you, if they need to make some trades, right, from depth, because now hey, outfield's locked up, so we know for sure where we want to go. I just, like I said, though, third base, they absolutely need more power. You got to figure out. I'm still a little frustrated that now they won't do it, can't do it, because you've got a mix of Candelario, Wisdom, maybe still Bellinger from time to time over at first base. I don't think we see Mervis back up. I would have liked to have seen that because I think they need to figure out for sure, can he do it? I still have faith in him.
That feels like a missed opportunity so far this season. I mean, like the Cubs, if you look at who was Mancini, the production they were getting from first base, basically the whole season, was like, why not just bring him up and plug him in at first and just let him go, right? And just kind of see what's up. I mean, I got the sense that he could bat 250, and as you had pointed out before they sent him back down, he was hitting the ball hard.
Yeah.
And so it's like, just let a guy like that run a little bit and see what happens. And for some reason, they just didn't want to do that. And now, to the extent that you're playing for a pennant, you're probably not going to see him back up because they don't have the room to do it. But really, in May and June, I mean, the Cubs could have brought him up and they wouldn't have. I mean, the productivity wouldn't have been any worse.
Well, that was the thing, is I'm looking at, like, they gave, and where I'm really frustrated with the whole thing is it really felt like they were trying to audition Mancini, like basically doing with Mancini what I think they should have done with Mervis, which is just, we're going to roll him out there more than he should be out there based on his production, because we're hoping beyond hope that he can rediscover something and either get hot enough to say he's worth keeping, or that someone will want to trade for him. Right, because it was pretty evident there for a while. Then, by the time they finally DFA'd him, it had been a couple of weeks. Well, probably more than that. But I mean, it was way past, like, that was the whole thing. And I'm kind of still to this day a little surprised they did it, because they've usually been so reluctant. Look how long Hosmer stayed around, even after Mervis came up the first time. right? To where it was like,
there they had nothing to
Lord.
lose, but with Mancini, I think
Yeah.
they've got to
They
pay
got
him
about
like
$10 million.
$7 million.
They got to eat, 7 next year and the remainder of this year, which is about 3.
That is
So yeah, they had to eat
bad.
it, which is why I figured they'd maybe hold on to him and we'd see something else come up. But I mean, good on them, and I mean, it sucks. Like, he's by all accounts a great dude. And I know that was not, I think that factors into it too. Not that,
Yeah.
like, most dudes aren't just going to be assholes in there, but if there was, but I mean, he's like an exceptionally good dude that people really wanted to see succeed. I mean, everybody, I don't think there's anyone who said, this guy sucks, get him out of here. He's just a terrible person. He's a bad presence, whatever, right? It's not Milton Bradley, but there again, like, they gave him all this rope, and it's like, dude, this is just not working. Like, it's just not. He's not a base runner. He's not playing good defense. He's not hitting. Like, at least if you bring up Mervis, you've got someone who could show some potential and see what you've maybe got. So we'll see. The only good news about it is at least he'll probably still be around with the iCubs when they come back through Indianapolis later this month. So I'll get to catch up with him, which is nice. And PCA will be there. Luke Little just got called up to AAA, right? They've got Jordan Wicks there. Hopefully Ben Brown will be healthy by then, although Brown's being moved into a bullpen role. So I do kind of wonder how much of that IL stint is like legit and how much of it's an opportunity for them to kind of, just keep him healthier while he transitions. But we can see Ben Brown in Chicago in September. We'll see how that all looks. But yeah, that's the one area where I think they fell a little short in terms of future planning. However, I will say that the reasoning of saying we want to keep this stuff together, we're not working on major league development right now because we legitimately think we can go for it. Now, I think those things can work hand in hand, but I do appreciate the fact that they're not, they didn't wave the white flag and say, hey, it's prospect heavy for the next 2 months and we'll see what we can get from those guys. It's no, we're going for it. So good on them for that.
And let's talk about where the Cubs are with pitching. They've got Javier Assad starting today. I don't know if he's rolling out there as a start, like, this like a 2 to 3 inning guy. I guess that's what he's doing, right? He's an opener.
He hasn't pitched since the 31st, so he's on regular rest. And I mean, I would say they want to get him to probably 75 pitches. So I guess it depends on how efficient he is in that. But I mean, they could get 6 innings out of him. If he's and he's been really, really good since he came back up for this most recent time. I was looking at the stats. So his last 9 outings, I think it's 22.1 innings. He's given up 1 earned run. That was on a homer, 9 hits, 22 strikeouts, 10 walks. That's all from memory from the lineup post earlier. So I think those are all correct. But he has been, and it's like a 60% ground ball rate in that time. So when you're talking about facing a team that hits homers like nobody else's business, he's a good set for them there. And I think, especially after Hendricks looked so bad yesterday, and knowing that you're probably going to be in for it with a really tough offensive team, I do think they're going to want to ride him as long as they can. But again, a lot of that's on Assad. If he pitches like he has been, he'll put him in good position. But
yeah, I mean, Hendricks yesterday was that 1 inning, right? I mean, he just completely fell apart.
He looked great before that too. Like, he looked really, really good, and then it was just like, boop, just shit to bed. It was like,
totally fell apart.
Yeah.
1 inning, and so you take that inning away, and I mean, obviously it's totally different, but it'll be interesting. You feel like the Cubs could win today. I mean, they need to obviously pitch well because offensively the Braves are just ridiculous. You've got to pitch them well. You've got to get them to hit ground balls and then let your defense work behind you. And if they can manage to do that today, they can win. I mean, offensively, the Cubs have been, I was looking at the whole season because obviously this is our first show this season. And just some stats, looking at April, May, June, July, and now we're into August. But, the Cubs have been at 500 or over in every month except May. They were 357, 10-18 in May. They were terrible. They averaged 3.6 runs per game and gave up 5, which is the worst and the worst on both of those numbers by a substantial amount. I mean, in July, they've scored 5.8 runs per game. And so their offense has definitely come along some of that is, getting Mancini out of the lineup, obviously, and making some changes where they needed to be made. And then obviously, having Bellinger pick up like the way he has just been incredible. Candelario, if he can continue to do what he's doing. Tachman has been like such an unexpected surprise. And it feels like there's more offensive upside. Like Amaya, that guy hits the ball hard, right? Like, I mean, he could step it up here towards the end of the season and start getting into a rhythm. That would really be beneficial. I don't feel like, what do you feel like Amaya is like defensively? Like, I haven't been able to get much of a read on he just doesn't, he seems like middle of the road to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing, the game's a little bit different. I think, so often they've got him paired with Hendricks, who's calling his own pitches. And so, I think there were, and Tyone was the first Cubs pitcher to use the pitch com, right, where he's calling them. And that was when he was working with Amaya. Now, Amaya's gotten a ton of praise. And it's one of those things, even going back to, I've written about this a couple times, but going back to when Scott Efros was in the Arizona Fall League, working on converting to that lower sidearm delivery that, that got him up to the bigs. Amaya was playing with him back then. And he said, Amaya knew my stuff better than I did, and we've heard that from a lot of guys, but it's so difficult to judge because normally, you talk about game calling and framing and things like, well, he's not calling the game. Now he can maybe have some, but I don't think he provides the input as much as say what Jan Gomes would. I think it's a little difficult with these young guys like that. I just haven't seen, for as much as steals are up too, like you sort of mentioned that, and I can't think of the one thing. Of course, a lot of people still have love for Wilson Contreras. I think we're seeing that the pitching staff is not any worse for maybe him not being there. But the one thing that you would see with him all the time was the back picks or the athletic throws and things like that. Now, I think that masked some of maybe his other deficiencies as a catcher, but we don't really see much of that from Amaya.
You don't see any of it, really.
Yeah, and he doesn't catch that much, but he's a different kind of catcher, and I think that's a big thing. You get so used to like how Wilson Contreras caught, right?
Yeah,
it was for lack of a better, he was a very loud catcher, right? He was fidgety back there. He moved a lot. He was making those throws, and so I think some of that's like you don't notice those things with Amaya, so it's sometimes a little bit more difficult. But I haven't gotten into the framing numbers to look at that and see where he's at on it. Honestly, I mean, I think he's been fine. But the pitch com thing does change a lot. And I'm sure we're getting to the automated ball strike system before too long, at which point then framing goes out the window.
What are they doing waiting for that? Like I was at a spring training game and it's such a smooth, so easy, right? It's just like you step out of the box, you ask for a review. It takes like maybe 10 seconds.
Yeah. And
they show it up on the screen.
Yeah. They were doing that. Minor league games. The AAA games, they're showing that. They call a review and they show the box. They show the ball come in. Boop, touch the zone. All right. Call stands, whatever. Keep going. And
that's a no-brainer because that's one of the biggest things that they can rules that they could implement that could really be game-changing.
Yeah. And would, I know a lot of human element. Yeah. I mean, there's not enough human element with a human throwing a ball and a human swinging a bat to hit it. Like, to me, the biggest thing is like, look, man, this isn't the 20s when people got mad if you threw hard. You know what I mean? Or it's not when everybody was just throwing 80 poo and it was all straight on straight as a string. And, they're going middle in on these guys. Like the movement and the velocity with which these guys throw is such that human error is one thing, but there's just at a certain point, there's just an inability by the human eye to adequately judge the strike zone based on what these dudes are throwing.
And especially on the calls that it's just like not even close. And we see them almost every game, some way worse than others. And it works for the Cubs and against them. But it's just it shouldn't be a part of the game. And it's not like you'd have unlimited. It's not robo umps. And I don't think that's the solution. You have to have an umpire back there. You're never going to go to a robo umps where it's automatically calling balls and strikes. And I wouldn't want to do that. But like just having the ability to say, give me the review. And if you're right, then it's just like tennis. It's the exact same thing.
Absolutely. As Dan points out in the comments there, they've been doing that forever. Right. Because again,
and it works perfectly.
Yeah.
It takes because no time at all.
And it's a very similar concept, right? Same thing with tennis. The ball only has to touch any part of that boundary line, right? If it's outside the line, but if it just touches it, and that's the thing. And it was really funny because there's this guy for The Athletic, right, who covers like MLB and NFL and mostly is a betting dude, but shared this picture of an at bat from Eloy Jimenez where he had gotten called strikes on a couple close ones, and this guy's like complaining about it, and everybody's replying back like, dude, those are all rule book strikes, right? And the guy like eventually, like he even replied to me because I quote tweeted him. I was like, maybe this should just be deleted. He's like, well, I'm not a coward. Yeah, but you're openly displaying as an MLB coverage guy that you don't know how the strike zone works. And he pivoted to saying the image isn't accurate, where previously he was arguing with people that like it's stupid that a pitch that is 95% out of the zone should still be a strike. And it's like, well, the rule book, as you should know, is that all the ball's got to do is touch the strike zone at all with any part of it. And that's the part where, again, it becomes so difficult because we're talking about pitches that might be traveling in excess of 100 miles an hour. They might be breaking 22 inches horizontally or vertically. And you're trying to discern whether or not that thing clipped the zone at a point. And it's just, and like you said, it's not as if there's just a computer back there. So if something glitches, they can't call the game. Like, no, the ump is still calling them just like a foul ball down the line. We can review that. We can review home runs. You can see any of these things that if that, we're already acknowledging
it's a no-brainer.
The game moves too fast, right? Like, so let's fix it. But this is all based on like how is Amaya as a catcher, right? So, but I do think that it'll be more important. I mean, whether and when Hendricks moves on, right? Will Stroman still be around? Which is really hilarious because Marcus Stroman went from like this dude's opting out for sure and getting a ton of money, they need to trade him, to like, oh shit, he might opt back in. Like that's like it's a threat, you know what I mean? Like, God, what if they have to get him back?
He's been awful. Wow, and I know he's on the IL now, but whoo, he fell apart.
Since the game when I saw him pitch in London, when speaking of which, when Trey Mancini flubbed up several times at first base, and then ever since, now he had a little hot spot. I do think the hip thing is, I mean, he got a cortisone injection in his hip, Stroman that is. So, I'm going to say that's legit, but I think that's also one of those things where like, hey, maybe put your pride aside, but I wonder how much of that was like, I got to keep going because I got to get this money. I got to get the bag at the end of the season. Like, dude, how much have you cost yourself by throwing these last several games like crap? And you've got a 9.0 ERA since that game in June in London. That is not going to earn you more money. Like, going on the IL and resting that thing up earlier would have been much smarter. So maybe the ego is bruised more so than the hip is in trouble. But but there again, I think Amaya will be really, really good as we're going to see some of these young guys come up. Mentioned Ben Brown, Jordan Wicks, Luke Little. They've got a few of these guys who can and will be coming up possibly as early as this year. Cade Horton is a bad man.
And I mean, if they could get like one or two of those guys to come up and make an impact in the bullpen, that could really be the difference between, the Cubs making some noise and the Cubs not making some noise. And I mean, just looking forward, like right now, the Cubs are the only team in the Central with a plus run differential by far. They've got plus 71. The next closest team is Milwaukee with -6. And I mean, the Cubs offensively have just been outstanding, right? I mean, 560 runs is great. It's, what is that, third in all the National League?
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty impressive. And it doesn't feel like that's going to be letting down any. And so it just really feels like if you can get some pieces in the bullpen, if you can get Stroman to come back and he's healthy coming down the stretch, because listen, I know everybody, we're all watching this Atlanta series, like what's going to happen? How are the Cubs going to be able to compete? I would say that yesterday was a great game for the Cubs. They had one bad inning and it's nothing to hold your head down about. It one inning, it doesn't matter. That's fine. So whatever the score was, not a big deal. I don't see a huge problem with the way the Cubs played yesterday. In fact, I thought they played really well. Going into today, it'd be great to get the win. But the Cubs, I mean, seriously, the Cubs could get swept in this series, and still be looking really good. They're only 2.5 games back right now. They play the Braves today, but going forward, I mean, they've got out of their next 18 games, they've got 3 against Toronto, and that's the only team over 500. And then they've got 15 games out of their next 18 against teams that are below 500 and not really very good teams. We're talking like Detroit, we're talking the White Sox, we're talking the Mets, the Royals, and the Pirates, right? And so a really favorable schedule for the next 18 games that could see them well above 500, should see them well above 500, going and playing Milwaukee in Chicago on the 28th. 3 games against the Brewers there. And so, I mean, you couldn't really ask for being in a better position, even if the Cubs can't squeeze one out here against the Braves. They're still looking really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, yeah, you'd rather, hey, it'd be even better if they could win 2 here against the Braves. That'd be awesome.
Of course.
But
I
mean,
great.
you look at it last night. Hey, they lost, the Reds lost, and the Brewers lost. So the Cubs, they got their asses kicked, but they lost no ground in the division, right? It's still tight. They just need to go take care of business. And I think, water is finding its level to an extent, because we saw it. Like, how were the Reds? How were they even in first place? I get they've got an exciting young team, and they ran off a nice win streak there, but that pitching staff is trash.
It is.
Like, it is.
It's their offense. I mean, it's all offense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Cubs have still scored 13 more runs than they have, but the Cubs have scored 560, the Reds 547, but the Reds have allowed 569, by far the worst in the Central. The Cubs have only allowed 489. In fact, 569 is the second most runs allowed in the National League, behind the Rockies, who have given up 631.
Right. And they play, they play at Mile High there, or Coors Field, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think the Reds were a mirage. I think that's all going to come back down to earth. The Brewers are still scary because they do have solid pitching, right? And that's kind of the difference there. Although their offense isn't really any good, or shouldn't be. So I mean, that's where it's like,
it's not.
If like the Cubs are a better team top to bottom than either of those. Now, part of that, the Cubs did not play, like you said, in May was what really hurt them. If they have a 500 May, they're in first place, right?
Yeah,
that makes a tremendous difference, right? They were 10-18, so 14-14, right? You put 4 games onto the win column,
got a 1.5 game
loss.
lead.
All of a sudden you're there. And again, that's no different from saying, oh, well, outside of one bad inning yesterday, they were fine, right? Well, that one bad inning was 7 runs and you get buried. But the moral of the story is they're a better team. And with 54, is that what's left? 53 games left in the season.
Mm-hmm.
They can make up 3 games on either and both, and more so, right? I mean,
52 games left.
Okay. So they've got a bunch of games still remaining against the Brewers, right? Just take care of business, play even with them the rest of the time, and then beat them in those games that you've got.
They've got 6 left against the Brewers, 3 against the Reds at Cincy, and then 7 against the Pirates.
Yeah. So I mean there you go.
This is the NL Central is the Cubs to lose. It really is. I mean, they I think they're favored. They were showing some stats during the game.
Brewers,
and if
the Brewers still are. I mean, if you look by Fangraphs, the Brewers still have a significant advantage in that. But there again, I think so much of that's like when you look at college football rankings at the beginning of the season, they say, oh, Texas A&M's ranked 4th in the country, and then they play like crap for 3 weeks, and they're still like in the top 10 because they squeaked out wins because they started at 4. If you started everything unranked, then they would suck. But I think, and that's part of it. The Brewers have just been up there for the whole time. But like that, come on, man. The Reds are fraudulent. The Brewers are, I don't know if they're necessarily fraudulent, but they're not a first place team, right? I mean, look, the Cubs haven't necessarily played like a first place team the whole time, but again, top to bottom, talent wise, where they should be, the Cubs are the best team in the division.
Their expected win-loss record is 62-48.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just crazy to think about, given, the number of runs that they've scored and allowed, 62 and 48, and yet they're sitting here at 56 and 54. So I mean, that's a significant difference.
Yeah. Just
in
play to that
where
level the rest of the way, and you're good.
they should be. Exactly. And that's why I'm saying it's theirs to lose. They should be in first place by the end of August is my prediction.
I'll take that.
Yes, running away, hopefully, and we've seen some Septembers to forget in the not too distant past, and so hopefully we don't have a September to forget, but should be interesting. So the Cubs have the 2 left against Atlanta. We'll see what happens today and tomorrow. Is Steele going tomorrow?
Yes.
Do you know who goes?
I wasn't even looking at it. I was just I did the lineup for today.
I think we have a website that says that stuff.
Yeah, it is Steele tomorrow.
Okay. And so, man, yeah, it sure would be awesome. And tomorrow's a 1:20 game. Is that Sunday night baseball game locked?
Probably. I think so.
Yeah. Because I'm telling you, if the Cubs can win today, and then you've got Steele going tomorrow, I mean, it's going to be electric at Wrigley.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. It'll be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun. So stay tuned. The game is starting here in about an hour, and yeah, let's try to do this again.
That would be a good idea. Maybe not 7 months in between.
Maybe not. Yeah, I think we may have to try to do that on the weekends though, because now that I'm working, it's just like so impossible to do it during the week. But yeah, do your kids start your son Ryan?
Mm-hmm.
When does he start up playing baseball?
So we don't have the fall ball season set yet. So I don't know for sure. Well, he's got to get out of his cast first. So he's in a cast. He's got a fractured elbow. It's not like a real fracture, quote unquote. Like it's not like a break, but there is what is called the epicondyle, which is like a little the little knob on the end, like inside your elbow right here, where there's a growth plate. So when you're younger, obviously your bones are still growing, and he was out there throwing, and the force of it just pulled the growth plate open a little bit more than what it's supposed to be. So it wasn't fully displaced or anything, but he's in a cast for a couple weeks. So should come back just fine. But he's on a new team, which is awesome. This is the team we wanted to be with and have wanted for 2 years. Or 1 year before this. So very cool stuff. So long story short, don't know for sure, but then it'll be a little fall ball, and then they'll be shut down for anything other than workouts, just because during the high school season, once the high school season starts, players who are on high school teams cannot participate in club ball at the same time, which is different from middle school. So they won't start up again until June. But really cool off-season program. So very, very excited for what we got coming.
Oh yeah, let's see. I forget. Like here, like we don't have baseball over the summer at all, and our baseball starts in actually September. Tournaments start in October and run through like April, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always forget that like other places don't do that.
Yeah, we're summer, so it's generally spring and summer. So usually the primary, like the high school season, will be like, I think they'll do tryouts in early March, mid-March, as soon as the weather kind of clears up, and then it's basically like April and May is the high school season, and then the travel season is June and July.
Gotcha.
Right? And then so they just did all the tryouts, they got all that. So yeah, so this will be like fall ball season will be like August, September, and then you go into an off-season training program October, November, December into January, and then it's year-round, but in a very different sense. So yeah, we'll see.
So my schedule will be dodging games and tournaments starting in October, but until October we should be able to go hopefully most weekends. At least the next month I'm here. I was on the road for like 6 weeks. I wasn't home, and then I come back home and my air conditioning, one of the 2 air conditioning units we have in our house is not working, and it's 114 degrees.
That's
so
that's not ideal. That's another reason. That's why, hey, folks, with anybody out there who's just got a whole crap ton of money sitting around that you've got nothing else to do with, and you want to go ahead and sponsor a podcast, paying for air conditioners and travel baseball would be, I think, a worthy use of the money that you just had sitting under your mattress for 10 years. And when you're sitting there wondering, you say, hey, you know what? My life is hunky dory. It's all peaches and cream. I got nothing to do with this 10 grand. I don't have kids. I don't have grandkids. I got to pass this on to somebody because I can't take it with me.
Support our kids.
Yeah. Support us financially, please. I need a sugar daddy, but or mama, whatever, you know.
Yeah, whatever, doesn't matter.
Too picky. Yeah.
So, all right, well, let's see what the Cubs end up doing today. We'll try to circle back next week, and yeah, let's see if I can remember how to do the outro.
Ooh, there we go. This should be interesting.
We'll see. Either way,
well,
see y'all. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again, hopefully soon. Later.